Damian Lillard going absolutely nuclear. Talk about a tale of two halves. 35 points in the first half for Damian Lillard. 0 points in the second half. He finished with 35 points for the game.
He did.
And everybody's trendy pick of Indiana beating the Milwaukee Bucks. It may still happen. No Giannis, but Dame goes absolutely nuclear in the first half. Finishes with 35 points. Had a buzzer beater step back three from deep. And it was, you put a poll question on this. How did you feel watching Dame Lillard operate in the postseason and having that performance?
I mean, I think the answer for everybody was a combination of both. I wanted people to pick the primary one, though, because I think there were moments of happiness for him in having this moment. It has not been a good regular season. We know what he's going through in his personal life. Milwaukee's become a trendy pick, as you mentioned, to lose in the first round. The guy that he's been teamed up with is now out for who knows how long in this series. And so there's been a lot of negatives that have gone his way. So you were happy for him to have that kind of performance. There's also a combination there of sadness of what, the last handful of years look like in Portland. As I take my headphones off because Swigard's having a full conversation with me. There was a combination of both. So I think seeing him have that first half, it was really impressive for them because they needed it. Nobody else showed up for them in the first quarter and a half of that game. And without Dame doing that, they get blown out of the gym. They couldn't find anybody else to make a shot. He went off. It carried them. You mentioned no points in the second half. He didn't really need to score any. But
they were up 30.
They were up 30, and they just kind of cruised to victory from that point. But by the time they kind of got to the second quarter, everybody else woke up. Portis got it going. Middleton ended up having a really good game. You got Morris hitting a couple of shots here or there. It kind of brought everybody along, and I think it was a wake-up call that Indiana was the trendy pick. They were the team. Halliburton, remember in the in-season tournament, he did the check the wrist, check the time. Damian Lillard remembered that. He went off, and we've seen performances like that in the playoffs before.
My only thing about that series I thought was interesting because, we've kind of jokingly adopted the Milwaukee Bucks as our Eastern Conference team because we all knew our beloved Blazers were going to be at the bottom. Having watched some of Indiana after that Siakam trade, I was at the first game that Siakam played after they traded him. They were in Portland. And Halliburton had just come back from an injury. They had a weird kind of second half of the season. The IST stuff.
They did. Felt like they were going in the right direction, and they didn't continue.
Well, they were a fun team, high-end, high-caliber offense. They just want to outscore you. They want to put 110 to 120 on the board, and that's their style of play. Rick Carlisle has kind of leaned into that. That's not who they've really been for most of the second. I was curious who'd really watched any Pacer basketball, and not that I had watched every game, but just having League Pass on almost every night and catching some Pacers action. And I follow one of the best people to follow for basketball knowledge, let alone Pacers knowledge, is a gal named Caitlin Cooper. Mm-hmm. She's really good, really knowledgeable of the game. She's been noting this too. The Pacers just kind of fallen off. Halliburton has struggled. And I know that they played 5 times because of the IST stuff. I think they were 4-1 against the Bucks, including that controversial Giannis chasing them down for the ball.
The game ball in the back alleys.
I just didn't see a Pacers team that everybody else had kind of seen from the IST. And so it's kind of why I liked Milwaukee. I still thought, and I still think, Indiana can push this series. But Halliburton hadn't been very good, and he was awful in that game yesterday.
He's terrible.
You put a poll question up. And I think it's a very interesting poll question because how does it not evoke an emotion from you? What did you feel more of watching Dame torch the Pacers in his Bucks playoff debut? Happiness or sadness? And it's 80.5% are happiness. And everybody that responded basically said, I'm happy for Dame. I'm rooting for Dame. And I love that. I think that's spot on. If you didn't have any ounce of sadness, look, I don't always sound overly optimistic about rebuilding. I certainly have had critical moments of the Blazers season. I think it's very fair. I think you should be holding teams accountable and be critical. You shouldn't just buy all in on everything the team does and assume it's all going to be rainbows and unicorns. But if you had no sadness at all of just okay, Dame operating in the playoffs and doing big things on an important stage. It's great. And he talked about this in the postgame. We don't have it, but he basically was asked what this was like. And he said, I was asked to basically shut it down, and it sucked for 2 years. He mentioned going to Coachella. And he's like, I never could go to Coachella because Coachella happens right now.
Right, it's in the playoffs.
And I was never available for it. And I liked that quote because we knew in the moment going into it how much he probably hated shutting it down and seeing the team operate in a tank. Whether that's the Shaden year or the Scoot year, it ate him up inside, especially last year. It's such a great season. He had the 71-point game. Like,
averaged almost 32, 33 points per game.
You could maybe make a great point that was his last top-in prime season as a player because all his stats dropped this year pretty significantly, and they somewhat, quote-unquote, disappointed. They were awful with Doc. But him having a breakout moment, I was really happy. But I did have moments of like, damn it. I don't know where they're going to go in this round. I don't know how far they're going to go, if they even get to these finals or have a shot against Boston, because I think Boston's going to cakewalk their way to these finals. But if you had no sadness whatsoever, I don't know what to say to you on that. Like, how do you not watch it and go, man, I know we couldn't have got Giannis, but all of the times in a previous regime, and then with the new regime kind of leading us to think they were going to try, but really not making any effort whatsoever and kind of leaning more into tank stuff. It wasn't a large portion of my feelings on it. I was really happy to see him go off, but I absolutely felt sadness just because I just wish we could have done more. And we had some really fun, random years. The West Finals experience was just nobody saw that coming. And yeah, they got swept. The Clippers injuries helped us the first year post LaMarcus get to the second round. That was kind of wild and whoa, what the hell? But I just would have liked to have seen more of an actual effort because he's still to this day debated about what he is as a player, somewhat based off of the playoff stuff.
I think it's completely based off of that.
Well,
because all the metrics tell you that he's the best player of all time, but they say, well, he didn't get to a finals, he didn't win a finals, Clyde went to 2, Walton won 1. That's the argument used against him.
Well, but he has the most efficient game in arguably basketball history with that game against Denver, and it kind of sums up the experience of they lost.
Yeah.
And so my thing was super happy for him, rooting for the Bucks. But I did have some, not a lot, but I did have some sadness just because that organization kind of weaseled their way out of the Lillard era. Yep. They didn't want to be the team trading him. They wanted him to demand the trade, and they'll never acknowledge that publicly. But I just didn't like the way they handled the end of it, and I didn't like the experience of not putting to use Cronin's quote, going back to the Olshey era, an all-in chips-in-the-middle move even once to say, let's see what this dude can do if he has the right things around him.
Yeah, that's why I answered the poll question with sadness. That was my answer. Not that I wasn't happy for him having that kind of game, as I just pointed out earlier, but it was the reminder of why I'm at where I'm at with my fandom. And it's not about that the tanking and going the draft route isn't necessarily the right long-term plan, or that there's concerns about Dame and where he's at in 2 years with his contract and the kind of player that he is. Like, I understand every single one of those arguments. For me, what I've tried to point out all year, it's like I've been worn down for 10 years, and it was 10 years of not trying. It was 10 years of them trying to look you in the eye and tell you that Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum as your backcourt with Al-Farouq Aminu and Mo Harkless can win an NBA championship without ever taking
being a conversation.
Or being a conversation.
Yeah.
Like, it was never a serious argument. And to go that long to have a player of that caliber and to never take a full swing, to never take let's give it a shot. If it doesn't work, well, that's going to suck, but we can always pivot out and trade him and get other draft capital. Like, we never made one of those moves with a player of that caliber. And you point to some of the playoff games that we lost despite him playing at such a high level. They're sharp reminders of a lot of really good memories and a lot of really sad memories. And watching him yesterday, you were reminded of what he is capable of when he's totally locked in and engaged. I think part of the reason he's had such an off year this year is because of what he's dealing with off the floor. It hasn't been pretty.
He's been very vocal about it, too.
It's all over social media. Yeah. It's out there, man.
His wife has posted some stuff on social, and
his family's back in Milwaukee. He gave Dame Jr. a shout-out, so I don't know how often he's even seeing his kids.
Well, I think he said his kid was in Portland. He said, shout out to my son who's
that's
watching
what I meant to say.
Portland.
Sorry. He's still in Portland, so I don't know how often he's seeing his kids. So that's hard to deal with, and I think a lot of that can wear on you as the season goes on. You're reminded that these guys are professionals. The other thing that I thought was interesting that I want to watch the rest of the playoffs was I don't know how much of this is Indiana just having a bad game or Halliburton being off, whatever. They were much better defensively yesterday than they had been in the regular season. And Lillard was asked about it after the game, and he said, look, in the playoffs, it's different. It's not a second of a back-to-back. You're not preparing for the next opponent, or you have another scouting report coming in. You know your team, and you know the matchups, you know the strengths, you know the weaknesses, and you can kind of lock in on those tendencies. And seeing if Milwaukee can play defense to that level, that can take them a ways in the playoffs if you get this level of performance from Dame on the offensive end, and then obviously get Giannis back healthy.
If they can get past Indiana, and it's a long series, the Knicks are an interesting team. See what happens with Embiid and the Sixers with that thing. Man, if they can get past Indiana, there's a really good chance if Giannis can come back and be healthy. The East Finals could be knocking, and maybe Boston's this juggernaut that nobody can touch, and that could be the deal.
Could be.
But just getting to an East Finals, it'd be a second conference finals appearance of his career, just getting there. That's all that dude wanted. And if
Give me a shot.
And if it can get Giannis back, now I'm a little worried about their bench, their depth. Middleton shooting percentage-wise, I don't believe was awful. Go back and look at what he shot, but I've watched Chris Middleton enough this year to go, that's not the NBA Finals Chris Middleton to me. I think there's a step, just a notch below. But that's all that dude wanted was a shot. If they can handle Indiana, New York doesn't have a ton of offense. Philadelphia's got a guy whose leg looks like he's breaking every single possession. Yeah. There's a really good opportunity, a window there to at least get to the East Finals and give yourself a shot against a team of the caliber of Boston. And that's all that dude wanted, and that's why I felt how I felt yesterday.